Welcome everybody. This is Boochie live on Kiosk Radio. I'm here today with two really special guests from two historical bands from Belgium. I'm referring to Aksak Maboul and the Honeymoon Killers. I'm incredibly pleased and honored to welcome today Marc Hollander and Veronique Vincent. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello, Boochie. Thanks for having us.
Today, I will divide the show in two parts. I will start by introducing the formation of Aksak Maboul, the project, in the first part, and try to give an overview of the evolution of this project. And in the second part, we will focus on the recently released album. It's actually the brand new fourth LP by Aksak Maboul was released just a month ago. And so we will dedicate the second part of the show to this brand new album. But I would start from the beginning, so the very formation of Aksak Maboul. And so we are in 1977.
Yes, we are.
11 danses pour combattre la migraine.
Mm-hmm.
11 dances to fight migraine. This is the first release of Kamikaze Records, the label of Marc Hollander, which is part of this project. Marc, can you give us some more information about the way this project came together?
Well, Marc Hollander had the idea to do a label. He called it Kamikaze, and it lived up to its name because it just existed for one day. It just released 4 records and then boom, it was over. And he just basically commissioned me to write and record an album because he saw me with another band and he liked the little noises I was making. And that's it. So I recorded lots of ideas that I had accumulated, and halfway through, I dragged in my friend Vincent to help me out, and he got more and more involved, and that was the start of it. And after that, we formed a band to perform the music live when the record was released.
Yeah, and before asking the first question to Veronique, I'm gonna already play one of the tracks, I would say a signature track of this first Aksak Maboul album. The track is Saure Gurke. It's incredibly visionary. It's a pioneering track for sure. It has been defined as proto-techno, surely draws influences from krautrock. We know that you were a fan in those years, and still, I'm sure, nowadays of kraut. And voila, let's listen to this Saure Gurke. Voilà, this was Saure Gurke. Marc, can you give us some more details about how this composition came together?
Well, I was trying to do a kind of variation or a thing inspired by Kraftwerk and Terry Riley and stuff like that, and this is what came out. But it's funny that I stumbled upon these chords that were used later also in Detroit techno a lot, you know, sort of opening riff. But yeah, I think it's a coincidence. Like, you know, the same causes generate the same results. You know, I was listening to that stuff, but they were also listening to Kraftwerk and minimal music, and plus the advent of drum machines. This was a pretty primitive drum machine.
Which drum machine did you use? Was it an organ inbuilt, or was it really a drum machine?
Oh yeah, it's a drum machine, of course.
Which one was?
ACE, you know, it's a Japanese brand. I think it's the type of drum machines that organ players used to use in bars, in cafes, you know, with like you have like switches, you know, bossa nova, cha-cha, rock.
Which was then actually present in other tracks and other records as well, in a way. Became some sort of signature in some way of some of the releases and compositions of Aksak Maboul. Yeah,
I've used it on a few tracks before moving to a TR-808, which was more fun because you could program it.
Exactly.
Which I still use today, the 808, because
another great one. Veronique, I read basically that in those years you probably weren't still involved in music directly. I think I remember that you wanted to be a journalist. I don't know if that's true, correct me if I'm wrong. And I wondered, in 1977, did you already know Marc? And what was your relation with music? Did you know this album already? And I actually don't know. I know that you came together, let's say, later and became partner in music and in life, but that's more from 1980. What was your connection with Marc back here during this first recording?
Well, at this moment, I didn't know him, as you say, and I just met him a few months ago. Sorry.
Okay.
And so it's and I discovered the record first.
1 year later.
1 year later, okay. And were you already interested, or were you singing already back then?
No. In fact, I thought I was going to be or an actress or a journalist. I was doing both things, and I don't know.
And then the path switched. We're gonna have a fast forward in a minute. Just before moving to the Honeymoon Killers and say the future of Aksak Maboul, I want to play an excerpt of another track that is very important for me, which is Milano per caso. It's a song that I listen to very frequently with my wife at home. She's from Milan, but I grew up next to Rimini, and I have to say this track literally reminds me of Fellini, and it could be a Nino Rota soundtrack. I'm gonna play it in a second, and then maybe Marc, you can add a few words on this Fellinesque sort of composition.
1, 2, 3.
this was Milano per caso. Marc, do you
Yes.
agree with the Fellini connection?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, in the new album, there's a section where I was trying to believe it's a dream scene in a Fellini movie, but that's something else. This song was written, it's the only one on the album practically, which wasn't written by me. It was done by Paolo Radoni, who was an Italian guitarist who passed away, unfortunately, 10, 12 years ago. He was a good friend of mine and we played music together way back before.
It was part of one of your first bands, if I'm not mistaken,
exactly.
right?
You're so well informed. I can't believe it. Yeah, we formed the band when we were 19 or something like that. A band that was called Here and Now, and when we were like students and like that. But he went more into jazz, and yeah, this is really his composition and my arrangement. He plays the acoustic guitar in it. It's one of the colors on this album, which is very diverse.
Very diverse. Yeah. So, Veronique, how this collaboration came into place? How did you meet Marc, and why did you start getting involved in music with the Honeymoon Killers?
Well, first I met Marc in a very special condition, and because I had to do something on stage with him. I was moving on stage, and he was playing with a poet, Belgian poet. Right. And then I started with the Honeymoon Killers. And as Honeymoon Killers and Aksak Maboul moved together, I started to be also in the Aksak Maboul. Yeah.
So there was an evolution in the formation of these two bands, Aksak Maboul and Honeymoon Killers, and also a merger, let's say. Yeah. Marc, can you give me some more background on that?
Well, after the second album, where the music became more and more complex and with really good musicians who are also technically excellent, I felt like moving on to a different phase and playing with musicians who were more primitivist in a way, who had like a rougher rock rhythm section. And I asked 3 of the Honeymoon Killers to join like the new version of Aksak Maboul. At the same time, they said, okay, we'll do it, but you also join the Honeymoon Killers, because they were also in between 2 phases. And so we did one show like that. And then Yvon, the leader of the Honeymoon Killers, hired Veronique. We were living together already. And one day I come to the rehearsal and I see Veronique there, and I ask her, how come you're here? And she says, oh, it's like that. I'm in the Honeymoon Killers now, because Yvon asked her to sing a song that he had written. And for a couple of years, we played under the 2 names, like different repertoires. We were aiming at doing 2 albums, the Honeymoon Killers album and the 3rd Aksak Maboul. And we toured like with the Honeymoon Killers lineup as Aksak Maboul for about a year. But in the end, the Honeymoon Killers won, because the album was ready. It was finished earlier, and we released the album, and it went really great. We toured all over the place, and the 3rd Aksak album was sort of left aside, and as you know, it ended up being released 30 years later, because we never finished it at the time.
Let's start by hearing one track from the second album of Aksak Maboul, Un po' de l'âme des bandits. I'm gonna start with I viaggi formano la gioventù, an Italian title, but with actually Turkish soul, let's say.
Yeah. Exactly.
And actually, the original title, if I'm not mistaken, was Truc Turc. Is that true, Marc?
Actually, yeah, we had working titles for these songs, and in the end, in a typically quirky, incomprehensible move, I kept the working titles on the label of the actual record, and I invented other titles for the sleeve, which I thought was funny. But yeah, all the songs were on the first side were sort of variations on dances. It was like tango, rondo, truc turc, pogo, and
Pogo, yeah. We're going to listen to Pogo a little bit afterwards as well. This is I viaggi formano
la gioventù.
We are back on Kiosk Radio with Marc Hollander and Veronique Vincent. This was I viaggi formano la gioventù, the second album of Aksak Maboul, and the first release, if I'm not mistaken, on Crammed Discs, which Marc has founded. I would say that compared to the first album, this one is even more cosmopolitan, I would say, more destructured. Surely less accessible in the sense there is more edge in several tracks. How can you tell us a bit more about the evolution, like also of the sound of Aksak Maboul in this Un peu de l'âme des bandits?
Well, when we formed the live band after the first album, and musicians came, and we were 4 at first, and the concert were very stripped down. Then we added musicians, and it became like that, more edgy, more complex. And eventually I asked 2 members of a band that I was a big fan of, which is Henry Cow. I asked Fred Frith and Chris Cutler to come and play on the record, which they accepted, to my great joy. It's always fun when you go as a fan to see a band after a show, and you give them your record, and they actually like it, and they even accept to come and play on your record. So amazing. Yeah, it's just an evolution. It's also music I was listening to at the time, and like that. But that's why after that I wanted to go into a different direction and go to something simpler in terms of
less complex.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
And before moving to the less complex, I would like to play, as I was saying, Pogo, which is inoculating rabies. It's a quite interesting title. I mean, we are living a pandemic now. I wonder what's the relation with the vaccination of rabies in this track?
Well, it's just, this was 79, we were just after punk, and we had the idea to do a punk-like rhythm section, but to have, this arrangement for bass clarinet and bassoon really up front, and with the sort of the punk band playing in the background. And when renaming the titles, I thought of rabies because punks were, enragés.
Great. So let's
But,
listen.
but there was no, it wasn't like a prediction of the COVID-19 pandemic 40 years.
Of course
I'm
not.
very, very visionary, but not to the
That
Not
was
that much. Not that much. So this is Pogo or inoculating rabies. There is the contemporary classical element, which also is quite interesting. As you said, the bassoon, and this conversation between a bassoon and a clarinet. If I
bass clarinet.
let's listen to it.
It's a bit silly, but it's fun.
Yeah. And this was inoculating rabies. The punk element is very present, and I thought it was a good bridge to move from Aksak Maboul to the Honeymoon Killers.
Yes.
As you were saying a few minutes ago, Mark, you were trying to reduce the complexity, and this merger with the Honeymoon Killers, which was also one of the one-day release. The first record is one of the one-day releases on Kamikaze, and both you and Veronique were not part of the initial formation, but a few years later, the project evolves. You decide to merge a few members now of Aksak Maboul, you and Vincent Kenis, if I'm not mistaken, and plus a new lead vocal, which is the first singing experience of Veronique. Veronique, how was this experience? What was for you being part of this band for the first time?
Well, it was very, very new and very funny as well. I didn't know I was a singer, and so I started a bit like this. It was for the moment, for the beginning, I was doing short songs, and then I write lyrics with Marc, and then it started to be more serious.
Okay. And you were already, so I mean, you wanted to be a writer, a journalist, so you were already interested in writing, I suppose, not only as a journalist, but as a poet, I would say, or as a more creative writer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I always was. I was writing since I was writing all the time. So
all the time.
It's something normal for me, like breathing.
And I wonder, like, is the inspiration or like the way you were writing back then, is it completely different to the way you structure your, let's say, your lyrics, your approach to lyrics nowadays has evolved a lot?
Well, in fact, for the first songs we did with Marc, I was trying to do something quite pop, you know. So I was trying to do words quite direct, and even if the story were a bit more complicated, I wanted to have very simple words. at the first time, because I want to do something pop.
That's great. And actually,
we were doing a pop record at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I think that the fact of having on one side the incredibly experienced musician, and on the other side a brand new discovered singer with a wonderful voice, but doesn't have probably the experience yet in the sector, gave this made this album even more interesting. Surely, I mean, there was a more pop and accessible side, but also, I mean, I wish I could see one of the lives of the Honeymoon Killers. Can you guys tell us a bit more how this Honeymoon Killers live was different from Aksak Maboul? Surely, as you said, less complex, but what was really more impactful for you in the live exactly?
Well, it was more rock for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot revolved around this duet of Yvon, the leader of the Honeymoon Killers, who was the lead vocalist also. So there were two lead vocalists, Yvon and Veronique, and the contrast between the two was fun, because it's like, people said it was like Beauty and the Beast, because he was like super,
theatrical in a way,
excited and doing crazy stuff, and Veronique was cool and collected and elegant, and the contrast was really fun. And the concerts were pretty wild. And it's funny that this band struck a chord not only in France, because we had a kind of minor hit with the Route Nationale 7, a cover of Charles Trenet. The same, so we were on TV sets with all kinds of pop stars, French pop stars. At the same time, we were sort of the darlings of the NME, which at the time in the UK meant something. It wasn't like the teenager magazine that it is now. We played like in underground clubs in Berlin and stuff like that for different reasons. The band was appreciated for different reasons by different audiences in different countries.
Fantastic. So we're going to listen to Décollage right now. It's a track I deeply love. I mean, this version of the Honeymoon Killers, so the second part of Honeymoon Killers, has been defined as sort of encounter of the New York no wave with a more French kind of chanson, French pop.
Yeah.
There are a lot of references that have been made. I personally, of course, think about Talking Heads. I thought about Conk, Les Immersiers d'Exclus. There are a lot of different vibes that remind me of other artists, but it's still incredibly unique. Also because of this French part inside in it, and this is Décollage.
Tu ne verras rien de la piste, tu t'en balances. Désormais fini les conneries, tu t'envoles vers une autre idée de ta vie, laisse au sol, écrasée de douleur idiote, celle qui fut toi toutes ces années sottes, quel gâchis. Prends l'avion pour un autre là-bas, aimer c'est si bête, aimer c'est si bas. Prends l'avion pour un autre là-bas, aimer c'est si bête. Prends l'avion pour un autre là-bas, Il ne faut donner d'importance aux sentiments que dans la mesure où je pense innocent.
We are back live on Kiosk Radio with Marc Hollander, Veronique Vincent, Aksak Maboul. This time, the Honeymoon Killers. We had a little detour on the Honeymoon Killers. This was Décollage. Veronique, what's your relation with the song? And what was actually, I wonder, one of, like, your favorite song of the album back then? If you had like a track that particularly talked to you or more than the others?
Well, I like very much this one. It's Yvon who wrote this song for me. There was another one which was Histoire à suivre. He first wrote it for me as well, and it's why I became in Aksak Maboul. Those two songs I like very much, in fact.
And in the meantime, besides the Honeymoon Killers, as we were saying, you started, working together on a series of tracks together with Marc that never saw the light of the day until much later, until 2014. Can you give us a bit more details? We're going to talk about your third LP very soon, which was, let's say, a compilation of songs that were composed in the early 80s. Why did you not release this material, these beautiful songs back then? And was it meant to be an Aksak Maboul project, or
Yes.
Give us a bit more details on?
Okay. Well, so as mentioned, when we hired each other, the Honeymoon Killers people came into Aksak Maboul, and I became part of the Honeymoon Killers, and the idea was to do 2 albums. The Honeymoon Killers album, what we just listened to, took time, and meanwhile Veronique and me were working on new songs, which was meant to be the third Aksak Maboul album, and sort of an electro-pop version of Aksak Maboul, if you like. Pop songs, but with all kinds of strange things that aren't supposed to be in pop music at the time. Anyway, we worked on these demos and we did some recordings in the studio, but we were quite busy with the Honeymoon Killers. We were touring a lot all over, and we sort of never finished them. And we also got dragged into overproducing them a little bit. We really thought we were doing a pop album, so we replaced the little drum machines and little organs by bigger sounding synths and Lind drums and stuff like that. And in the end, we weren't happy with it. And when we played it to people, pop audiences thought it was too weird, and the more, let's say, left field audience thought it was too pop. So we always thought we need to put more work in it and produce it more. And gradually we left it aside. I became more and more busy with the label. And it took quite a while until we thought, okay, maybe now there's an audience that could like these songs as they were, even the demos. We went back, we unproduced some of them because we went back to the demo stage. So this was in 2014. And by that time, there really was a new audience that was ready to listen to eclectic stuff, like to bands that were totally blending styles, that were doing pop with totally non-pop elements in it. So we pieced this together. We sometimes went back to cassette tapes because we lost some of the material. We did editing from cassettes blended with rough mixes and different things. And we put it out, and the reaction was phenomenal. People really loved it. And we sort of gained a totally new audience with this. And the fun thing is that the new audience that discovered Aksak Maboul with this album, so I'm talking about people in their 20s or 30s, they embraced the older ones as well. They didn't, unlike the people at the time, they didn't find it shocking that the same band would express itself in sort of almost in a different genre from one record to the other.
I mean, there is a common line, but it's true that every single album has a completely new vibe or new direction. And I'm sure that back then you had the world, let's say your audience was splitting in those that were un peu de l'âme is the best, and some others were,
Exactly.
Yes.
you know.
Totally, yeah.
So people were more taking their stand, their position, and nowadays you think that the new generations are more open-minded and ready to experience, let's say, even with the same band, very different music directions?
Yes, but also because the name has been around for so long, Aksak Maboul, it's almost like an institution, you know, it like disappeared for 30 years, but it's still there somewhere, you know, and just because of the longevity, you sort of get, you become legitimate because you've been around for so long.
So long.
And I think people are, in that case, are ready to accept that this band is morphing from one incarnation to the next, for sure.
We're gonna listen to one of these songs. I selected Chez les Aborigènes. Once again, was it composed when exactly? We're talking about 83, 84?
80, 1980.
This is much earlier, okay.
It was the first one we did
first one.
together.
Late 1980s, just exactly when we started with the Honeymoon, because right away started to write songs, and this was the first demo we did.
The first one. Chez les Aborigènes, released then in 2014, ex-Future album, with a beautiful cover made by McLeod Zygmuth, a good friend of Kiosk Radio. Shout out to McLeod as well. And this is Chez les Aborigènes.
Je crois, je vais vomir.
Les Aborigènes, once again, your cosmopolitan, let's say, attitude is present in the song, not only in the music but also in the lyrics. Can you tell us a bit more, Veronique, about this particular text, especially for the non-French speaking audience? What was your inspiration? What you're discussing exactly in this track?
Well, I'm thinking about the Aborigines, and because they live they think dream is also the real life. And in this song, I was trying to imagine me in that way, and also it was a bit ironic because I was saying that I'm going to
steal
the original music.
Yeah.
And well, it was quite ironic words.
Well, humor was also very present, especially in the Honeymoon Killers since the first day. Probably a bit less in Aksak Maboul, and I have to say probably that kind of humor became more present with this composition, the more poppy ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the text, if I may comment on Veronique's text. The funny thing is it describes Western youngsters going to the third world, discovering other primitive cultures which are supposed to be ancestral and pure, which is a total fiction, and they just appropriate it and become pop stars by stealing the music of the Aborigines. It's written there like black on white, which it's a comment which is still valid. I mean, this happened over and over again.
So you were discussing cultural appropriation in 1980, and it seems that this is something still not clear nowadays. Is a debate really present nowadays as well.
Exactly.
So the pioneering aspect of Aksak Maboul is there also in the content, if I may ask.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so let's take the second part of the show to discuss finally the latest LP, which, as I said in the beginning, came out only a month ago. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 crisis, the tour has been postponed. We are all looking forward to seeing the new live and once again the new formation, because the new elements, the new band members continue to change since 1977 till nowadays, which is great. With the Ex Future album, you started touring again, so that album actually put you back into the actual stages. How did you move from that to deciding of recording a brand new album with new compositions?
Well, it was not. First, we didn't think that we are going to do any concert and nothing, because we didn't do that for ages. But so we decided, well, we are going maybe to do one or two songs on stage, and then
like for a release party or something.
Yes, like something like that. But after the press was quite enthusiastic, and so we
So it's Atelier Klaus' fault, basically, in a way.
I don't remember.
Was that one of the first
that was the first.
That was the first concert.
Okay, so in a way, it's
what?
In a way, that opened the way to a series of concerts that then turned into a new thing.
The fact of adding one musician, actually our daughter Faustine, we asked her to play some bass on 2 or 3 songs that we were going to do for this release party. Then we asked 2 members of Amatorsky, band we were working with at the time. And after a few rehearsals, we found that we had a great sounding band that gave a lot of flesh and blood to these demos from 30 years before, and gave them a different dimension. They became more organic. We made them more trippy also, like going into more wilder variations. And it went so great that we ended up doing a few dozens of shows around Europe. It was really exciting. And during the process, we had to rearrange the songs. And that gave us the desire to, we saw that we could do new songs, basically, because there were some sections that we added and like that. And it was logical to try and do a new album, which took us 2 years, but the result is, kind of beyond our expectations.
It's amazing, and it's receiving amazing press. We were going to listen already to one of the tracks of the new album, Figures. out a month ago, and this is Blaue Bleistift, which actually is not in the album. It's an extended version of a track in the album. Can you give me a bit more detail? You told me that it was inspired. There is like a tribute to Robert Walser, if I'm not mistaken.
You told me that. Well, the title is a reference to Robert Walser, yes, indeed. But yeah, we had fun like dropping these little hints and references, which are sometimes unrelated. In the lyrics, they are related to literary works and writers. In the titles of the interludes are more like dropping gratuitous hints, just for fun, like
just for fun.
Okay.
And Veronique, you draw, let's say, upon poetry a lot. You take inspiration from poetry in the way you write lyrics as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I use all the books I was reading, and sometimes I steal words there and there,
and make a collage in some way, because like
no, not really.
No, okay.
No, in fact, I really write the words. It's not collage at all, but
okay.
But I like to steal there and there
a word or to respond to some stuff that was written. Yeah, it's more like a transmutation process, just taking in loads of stuff. It's parallel to what I do with the music.
Yes,
exactly. But that's why, like, for me, in the way I was listening to it, I had the feeling that, I mean, these figures, which is also the title, is also in a way the process of creation, which is related, like working with music and with lyrics as it were images sometimes. So that's why I said collage. But
yeah,
I don't know if you agree with that. It's just personal, let's say, interpretation.
Yes. What do you think?
Yes.
Mm-hmm, yes.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like painting a picture with loads of different elements. I mean, we'll talk about it in a second, I'm sure. But yeah, this album, the work on this album is like doing a huge painting, if you like, painting in movement, because it's, you have all the layers and the foreground, background details, and also different sections because it moves in time, unlike a painting. So it's like a, kind of movie.
T'as déjà commencé à enregistrer?
Well, this is something different.
Warum steht diese Frau am Fenster?
Bon, qu'est-ce que je fais?
Blaue Bleistift. This was from the latest album of Aksak Maboul, Figures. Guys, can you tell us a bit more about the way you're organizing your creative process exactly? How you create your composition? Where do you start? Does it start from the lyrics? Does it start from the music? And how you evolve into creating these songs?
So, yeah, about 2/3 of the songs started from the music, including the melody, which is pretty precise. And then Veronique, who is like moving all kinds of ideas and words and elements on her end, she then has to narrow it down, and you know, it's a stronger constraint to have to fit words onto these melodies. In the other third of the songs, they started with the lyrics, and I built the songs from the lyrics. Now the music, I do all kinds of different things. I start with a rhythm that I build, and I play on top of it, and then I select bits and you know, from an improv, and use that as a, you know, building block to do a track. All kinds of techniques, really. It was a discovery because I never did this before. I never used the music software because there weren't any when I stopped creating music for 30 years. So, you know, there was no Ableton Live in 1983, right?
No.
It was all tape machines, and yeah, you could program drums and you know, 808, 303, stuff like that, but no, you couldn't move stuff around. So this was really great. It works really well for me to be able to move things around. But you have to be careful not to be hypnotized by the grid when you work with the software, because all these software were basically designed to do electronic, you know, dance music. So it's all pretty square. I mean,
yeah.
Also, people who play dance music can have to overcome that, but you know, not to stay totally glued to the grid and to the beat. To be able to break it, to break it and move into something else. So I did a lot of collages also of sounds, and taking a bit from here and put it there, and field recordings, which is fun. You know, even stuff recorded here at home. In the song we just listened to, there's some stuff that Veronique says is deliberate, but some is stuff that I just recorded her while we were having a conversation.
Accidentally, also that she wasn't aware sometimes?
Sorry?
Was she always aware you were recording, or it was also sometimes surprise recording?
Yeah, in this one there was some surprise recordings.
Yes, this one, the Bleistift, it's like that.
Yeah, it's like in one section she's telling me, yeah, I have 3 words for this song, and she's enumerating the words, but it's for another song, but this sentence is somewhere in there. So also, yeah, what I try to do is to blend, well, of course, yeah. Okay, there were like 3 missions. One was to do songs, but also non-songs. Do stuff that's pretty accessible and poppy, but stuff that's also pretty experimental, and to blend it all together. And to blend acoustic and electronic elements, stuff that's programmed, stuff that's totally improvised, and to manage to do all that together.
In a way, it's a synthesis of the previous identities of Aksak Maboul.
Sorry, I didn't get that. It's what?
In a way, it's a synthesis. It synthesizes
what
you liked in the past, and
exactly. So that was the second idea: is to, you know, no limits, just do whatever we wanted to do, or whatever we're able to do, because we can't do anything that we'd like to do, but just to play around with all the stuff that we like, and also the previous phases of Aksak Maboul, but to incorporate that and make it into something else, because it has other elements, of course. It has elements of stuff that I've listened to during the 30 years that I wasn't doing music, electronic music and stuff like that. And the third mission that we gave ourselves was to conceive this as an album, not from the get-go, not from the beginning, but to always with the idea that we would have in the end to just weave this into something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end that provides a listening experience like a journey, through different atmospheres and landscapes and moods.
Fantastic. We're going to listen to another song. This one is C'est Charles. Who is Charles? Veronique, tell us a bit more about the lyrics and this song in particular.
Well, there are a few things inside. Charles is Baudelaire, because he wrote something which is called Le Mauvais Vitrier, and it's
the evil glassmaker, or the bad glassmaker, window maker.
Yes, and he says at the end, what we want in the life, it's only beautiful, and everybody can have beautiful
beauty.
Yeah. Beauty, yes, and so that's why I said that few times, and because I was also speaking about the art market and things like that. So it's a mixing of
about the business aspect of the the visual arts market and the way it's become financialized.
Industry.
Financialized, I don't know what. Yeah, it's the art industry.
So there is a lot of a level of criticism, even sometimes in a mysterious way, if I can say, in your lyrics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic. This is C'est Charles.
Si sous mes faux airs, je ne suis pas faussaire, sauf c'est nécessaire de mes sphères imaginaires. Monte en éclaircie, sombre à la merci d'une nette autopsie de sens mes allégories.
Back live on Kiosk Radio with Marc Hollander and Veronique Vincent, Aksak Maboul. This one was C'est Charles from their latest album, Figures. Once again, the certain elements of the history of Aksak Maboul are very present in this track. There is a bit of minimalism in one of the let's say the harmonic parts. The new pop element is clearly present. And if I'm not mistaken, it's one of Giles Peterson's favorite new tracks or the favorite new track of the album.
Yeah, indeed.
And way less importantly, it's also one of my favorite tracks.
More importantly.
So,
yeah, I could see how Gilles Peterson would relate to that, because it has an element of sort of, post hip hop jazz, like in the rhythm and the chords and stuff like that. But there's other stuff as well. Yeah, there's a definite jazz influence there, which is one of the,
And I think that what's really amazing is that by maintaining this pop soul, let's say, the harmonic complexity is still there. So you managed to find, I think, this very interesting middle ground between being accessible but still maintaining some sort of complexity in the harmony.
Great. Thanks. Glad you like it. Yeah, we really like that one too.
Moving to Silhouette, we were talking about Federico Fellini at the very beginning of the show, and I can see a continuation there from Milano per Caso to Silhouette as well. There is a version with vocals in the album, and also a single which is like an instrumental, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Could you give us some background about this and
about the song? Like many songs, it starts from a silly idea. Let's do something that's a bit like a electronic bolero, but also I had the idea to have like a dream scene in an imaginary Fellini movie. That's like the one before last section with the spoken vocals, with everything. It's always like that. I try to imagine something, but fortunately I don't succeed, and people will hear something else in it. But try to imagine that it's a scene, in an outdoors terrace of a bar, like at 4 a.m. where two people are dancing, half drunk. There's some light bulbs hanging, and some bizarre music, distorted music, with a half-drunk saxophone player in the back, something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of atmosphere is also very. It recalls a lot of images. It's very visual in a way. I know that, of course, the visual part of this new album is very important. Veronique, while not being busy with Aksak Maboul, you've also been a painter and a visual artist for the, let's say, the 30 years almost of inactivity. So besides a lyricist and a singer, you dedicated your time to visual arts. Can you tell us a bit more about your background as a visual artist and specifically about how you design the cover of figures, and why figures are so important for Aksak Maboul?
Well, I don't know. In fact, when I stopped to be on stage with the Honeymoon Kiosk and Aksak Maboul during the 80s, I started to paint, and then it's a bit the same process, processes. Yes, and when in these figures. I speak a lot about painting and things like that, and images and landscape and things like that.
And characters also.
And characters, of course.
Yeah, there's different songs that, different.
Yes, and this Silhouette is the atmosphere that Marc put on this music. It makes me think about the people I know or I knew, and I wanted to speak about people that I never say anymore, or I never say because they live very far. I never see because they are far from me.
Yeah,
or because
they're
not on the planet anymore.
Yeah.
That it's about people who have disappeared, and like silhouettes of people you miss,
and I mean,
real or imaginary, actually, even.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it could be a title track, but figures is probably broader in the sense that figures is a word that can have different meanings. Silhouette is just one part of a figure.
Absolutely.
What are the other parts or figures that you saw and you tried to put in this album?
Well, the title came after the album,
Yeah.
as often. But yeah, we thought it's a good word because also it's multilingual, which is important because actually most of our audience is not French speaking. It's always been like that for Aksak Maboul, and even with the songs in French, as was the case with the Honeymoon Kiosk, as we were saying before, most of our audience doesn't speak or understand French. They're from all over. It's like 3 people in Lithuania, 22 in Japan, and 25 in California. Anyway, so it's like that. So figures is understandable by everybody and has multiple meanings, of course. It's silhouettes, it's historical or literary figures, figure de rhétorique, like style.
Rhetorical figures, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or also figures like when you have like a little drawing that explains something in a book, like figure 1, figure 2, and numbers as well. I don't know what the numbers have to do with this, but it's one of the meanings of the word for sure.
For sure. So let's listen to Silhouette, one of the forms, the different forms of figures in this album. Also one of my favorite, I have to say, in the album.
L'obscurité de mon souvenir illuminé, apparitions anxieuses, silhouettes si silencieuses, qu'une brume d'absurdité obstinée à imaginer. Ailleurs, les manquant leur désertion fixe la raison de cette adulation au vide furtif ou trop constant, comme l'inéluctable charpente d'une existence galante.
This was Silhouette from Figure's latest album of Aksak Maboul. We're again live with Marc Hollander and Veronique Vincent. The interview is approaching the end. Let's just before leaving you discuss a bit the future of the coming months, let's say, which were, as we said, affected by COVID-19. When are you expecting to be able to perform live with Aksak Maboul, and what's in the pipeline for you in the coming months and years?
Okay, so we'd like to play live whenever the conditions allow it. Mm-hmm. There's talk of doing some shows in the autumn, if it's possible, and and maybe a live stream that you may have heard of, but maybe not.
I heard about it. Let's see if somebody else will hear about it soon as well.
Okay, so maybe we'll do like a first short set, live stream set in September, and then we're working on a tour, basically the same tour. 1 year later, starting from February. Normally we should be going to Japan in February if it's maintained.
Wow.
To play several shows, and then just around Europe, France, Germany, Belgium,
England,
hopefully the UK, etc. Denmark. We had all these things lined up already. Switzerland, Spain. Mm-hmm. No, Italy for the moment, but we'd love to.
Yeah.
Italy is always a complicated market for everything which is not straightforward pop. You're already too alternative, I'm afraid, for my own country. I'm afraid.
We get loads of great comments. Some of the nicest reviews came from really small blogs that were really imaginative in the way they describe the album. Yeah. So there are fans, but again, maybe they're just 13 of them, so it's not enough to tour. And then we're already working on another album, aren't we, Veronique? That's the idea, because after doing this thing, which is pretty massive, a double album, and it took a lot of time. It's like, when you fall off a horse or something, you're supposed to like start riding again the next morning. Not that I've ever been on a horse, but just not to lose the momentum. We started already recording elements for another album, which would be a bit different, trying to take a tangent and not try to do the same thing, but to do something a little bit different.
There are another few one small thing that I haven't discussed yet, which is like the featurings. I mean, in the album you have collaborated with a lot of musicians, including some personal friends like Martin Mero, Jordi Grognard, etc. And you have also some more, let's say, notable internationally known artists. Can you give us a bit more information about who collaborated with this album? And also, are you planning to change in the future once again the formation of the band?
No, the live lineup will be the same as it's been for the last couple of years, with Lucien Frépon from Rolling Millions, Eric Hestermans, the drummer, and Faustine,
your daughter,
sings, plays bass and keyboards,
and who co-produced with you the album.
She helped produce the album for sure.
Yeah.
The guests, they just happened as always. The members of Aqua Serge have become really good friends. 3 of them live in Brussels. We've done shows with them. They're signed on Crammed Discs also. Mm-hmm. It all started from asking people to do covers of our Ex Future album songs for this thing which was called 16 Visions of Ex Future, and I got in touch with them because I liked their music. I just wrote to them on Facebook, and they did a cover, and gradually we really became good friends, because they share some of the same musical roots that we have, except that they're not the same generation, but that's a fun thing. Same thing happened with Laetitia Sadier from Stereo Lab. Like when she did a cover for that album, and she discovered that Tim Gain knew Aksak Maboul from way back then, but she never heard it, and she was almost in shock. She said that in interviews. It's like discovering the roots of her own music that she didn't know about. Nobody knew about, because it hadn't come out anyway. So anyway, going back to the guest, Fred, who was on the second album, he just happened to have a week in Brussels because he was invited by Ars Musica to write a piece for a contemporary, classical ensemble, and he took a day to record with us and just overdub loads of stuff and loads of songs. Stephen Brown is this piece that Veronique wrote, which is like a mini theater play, Dramuscule. And for the male character, she thought of Stephen because of his voice and his theatrical abilities.
A bit of a, let's say, revival of the old days with the Honeymoon Killers, perhaps? This kind of back and forth?
Yes, why not? Yes, it's funny.
It's probably a little less of a beast.
You're right, I didn't think about it, but
What, the
why
dialogue,
not?
you mean?
The dialogue, yes.
Yeah,
yes, but
the
it's yes. In fact, it's. I started to write it in very protesting way of
Well, about
about
male-female relationship and
the perverse man and things like that. But after that, it became something quite funny between Stephen and me, and the song is both.
It's both. Once again, so there's a critical side also with
Exactly.
humor and probably something which is more subtle or mysterious, but still very clear, with a clear message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Honeymoon Killers, but also in the music. I mean, the first part certainly it's a kind of attempt to do a no wave section. With the sax stuff. It's a bit of a tribute to Yvon and the Honeymoon Killers as well.
Great. So as you were saying a few minutes ago, you tried to conceive this album with a clear beginning, a clear story, and an end. And so there was no more appropriate ending than Tout a un fin, which is the last track of the album. We're going to play as a last song today. It's once again an absolutely beautiful song. I'm going to play the short version, which is in the, let's say, release that preceded the album.
In the video.
Yeah.
And I'm going to once again thank you warmly for joining us today, for giving us all these anecdotes and information about the history of Aksak Maboul and the Honeymoon Killers, with the hope also of seeing you soon again on stage and perhaps maybe on a live stream.
Yeah, maybe. Thanks very much, Boochie.
Thank you. So this is Tout a un fin.
Everything ends.
Le cri, la danse.